is the DeFi Decoded podcast by 9 Point Partners. The ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast should not be taken as investment advice. Always consult with your financial advisor before investing.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the DeFi Decoded podcast. I am Alex Tapscott here with Andrew Young. Andrew, a lot of people talk about how Web3 is going to decentralize financial intermediaries. And, to paraphrase Jeff Bezos, your margin is my opportunity. The idea that by enabling peer-to-peer transactions, we're going to cut out the middlemen and reduce the amount of money that they make. And in some respects, that's been true in areas such as stablecoins, where you can move money in US dollars between individuals anywhere in the world without the need for, a Western Union or a MoneyGram, and you can do so basically instantaneously. Or you can get access to, lending pools via DeFi that doesn't require you to keep money on deposit at a bank. But that doesn't mean that there isn't money to be made in this area. And no company proves that point, in my view, more than Tether, the issuer of USDT, the stablecoin. So they just released their 2023 Attestation report and reported a profit that's quite staggering of $6.2 billion of net profit in US dollars. Now, no one really knows how many people work at this company. Part of the opacity and secrecy is something that has raised some concerns in the past, but we're looking at like a company with maybe 100 people, but probably more like 50, making $6.2 billion. So I'm not aware of any corporation in the planet that has such a strong profit per employee. And just to put that number in perspective, that's more money than Starbucks makes in a year, or more than Nike makes in a year. These are companies that have market capitalizations of 150, 170 billion dollars US. Now, how is it that they make this money? Well, it's a combination of factors. One of the main drivers is that for every dollar of stablecoin that gets issued, someone needs to deposit money. That money that's put on deposit gets invested into mostly US treasuries. Now, until recently, treasuries have yielded pretty marginal returns, but in the last couple of years, we've seen interest rates increase significantly. And as a result, you can effectively invest risk-free, meaning simply that you can lend money to the US government and earn up to 4 or 5%. So when you've got $100 billion or $120 billion of money on deposit, you can begin to see how that adds up. In addition to that, they've also allocated some money to some strategic projects, such as mining and AI infrastructure. And they've also allocated money to Bitcoin. To my knowledge, they are the only centralized stablecoin issuer that's over collateralized, meaning a portion of their profits they take towards buying assets like dollars, like Bitcoin. And that basically means that for every dollar outstanding, there's at least $1 of collateral. Now, you don't have to take their word for it. They do have third parties that do the attestation, but some of this is a bit of belief, like, this is what they say. And so we've got to take it at face value for the purpose of this conversation. But Andrew, you're a student of history and of business history. Is there any comparison for Tether in the history of modern finance? I would think maybe, long-term capital management before it blew up, or, one of the big hedge funds, Renaissance Technologies. Like sometimes hedge funds make just a ton of dough off of carried interest, but I just can't think of anything that has this kind of analog for an operating business in the financial world.
Yeah, Tether is effectively has a monopoly on the crypto version of a euro dollar, while also paying zero paying zero back to depositors. And it looks like increasingly regulation will actually prevent both them and any other potential competitors from actually paying any of the interest back to depositors, because effectively it sort of makes the stablecoin a security. And so exactly like you said, like you can Tether's not a bank, but you can just for simplicity sort of think of it as a bank. You deposit $1 million with Tether. They give you 1 million tethers, and then Tether just takes that $1 million and effectively buys, $900,000 worth of treasuries, and then I'm not sure on the exact balance, but then like $100,000 of sort of other assets. It's actually, I think now it's even, like you said, it's even the full $1 million is actually just treasuries. And now that treasuries yield, over 5%, it's an incredible business model. And it also has de-risked them quite a bit, because in the past, they sort of searched for yield a little bit, and didn't put the full sort of, using that example, full $1 million into treasuries. They did like secured loans, for example, where they would, if you're a Bitcoin miner and you need to borrow cash against Bitcoin, you would do like a over collateralized loan. So I think they did a lot of things like that, which sort of gave the community a bit of like people using Tether a bit of a pause, particularly in a bear market. So now it's just full treasuries. And then on top of that, they also hold a ton of crypto on their balance sheet. And obviously crypto is up pretty significantly over the last 12 months. And the reason why I call it a euro dollar is Tether is for the most part targeting the non-US crypto market, whereas USDC is targeting the sort of like domestic US market. And that's why, Circle, which is the issuer behind USDC, is planning a US IPO in the next kind of like 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
Just because it sort of fits with their sort of core strategy of being part of the US establishment. Whereas Tether is, I think of it as kind of like the crypto version of the euro dollar. Euro dollar is essentially like US dollar denominated deposits at foreign banks. Essentially like euro dollars are not subject to regulation by the Federal Reserve because they're, held outside of the US. And that's kind of like how Tether does, it does play by the rules of, like it has the same sort of pausing and blacklisting functionality that USDC does. But it's sort of at least seen as kind of like safer, maybe not safer, but less sort of regulated version of USDC. I'm actually not even sure if that's even the case anymore, but it's definitely seen that way. And then it's also definitely used far more by sort of ex-US customers, particularly in Asia. And yeah, so that's sort of how I think about it. So buying like Tether, the company is effectively has a monopoly on the crypto euro dollar market.
Yeah, I mean, there's the euro dollar analogy, I think, is a really interesting one. So, after the Second World War, a lot of foreign nations, companies, individuals were looking for a way to hold US dollars. They didn't have US bank accounts. They wanted to do it with European institutions. And that's how this market kind of naturally evolved. I mean, it does seem very analogous to where we're at today, where you've got a lot of crypto native firms, but increasingly everyday individuals who want to own dollars. Now, it's what's different, I suppose, this time around is like to what degree the user base for USDT is retail versus, say, financial institutions or governments. We're talking about an asset that can be held in denominations as low as $1 or less, actually, like any other sort of dollar deposit, can be held in a self-custody wallet, can be held on an exchange, and so on and so forth. And we've seen in a lot of parts of the world how USDT in particular has become really a financial lifeline for a lot of people, certainly as a store of value, but increasingly as a medium of exchange. And the logic is pretty simple. If you're living in a part of the world where you don't have access to bank deposit infrastructure, like a way to get a bank account, you don't have a way to store value in an asset that doesn't depreciate or lose value the way a lot of foreign currencies do, or you're concerned about bail-ins from banks, as we saw in Lebanon, or about corruption inside of institutions, then this is certainly a viable option, right? And that's why we've seen this explosion in the growth of USDT. Interestingly, USDC, which Circle's a great company, and USDC is a remarkable product, but by taking the purely regulated route, so to speak, of being in the United States, they have limited themselves to that part of the market that's outside of the US. And actually, at least as far as I can tell, one of the big drivers of adoption is by everyday citizens in all these different countries who are looking for a way to get access to dollars. As simple as that sounds, and as trivial as it might seem to people who are listening to this podcast in Canada or the US or something, that's actually a superpower. It's a tool, a financial utility that few people have access to, but for whom I think everybody wants it, right? And I think that's very interesting too.
Yeah, it's interesting too. It is kind of a funny like full circle moment, because like when I got into crypto in like full time in sort of mid 2017, for the first like 3 years or first 2 years of my crypto career, there was just constant nonstop chatter, or maybe even screaming, about how Tether and Bitfinex were, under collateralized. And so it's pretty funny that they're now the most profitable company in crypto. It's kind of, and
So they say.
and not even just the most profitable, but also, to me, like an incredibly defensible business model with huge network effects. Like it's not like a hedge fund that just did well, but there's not really network effects to a hedge fund. If anything, there's like diseconomies of scale, because as you get bigger, it gets harder to make money.
Yeah.
With Tether, it's the exact opposite. As it's gotten bigger, it's just cemented its dominance even more, to the point that you don't even really see people come out with like a lot of stablecoin competitors. If anything, we've been seeing a reduction in sort of potential competitors. Binance shut down their stablecoin. It's really kind of a two-sided market at this point. A bunch of the sort of like algo stablecoins blew up. It's sort of a two-pronged race at this point between USDC and Tether, and I think USDC's market cap's actually been going down.
Yeah.
So if anything, Tether's been dominating even more. And then like there's like MakerDAO essentially as a crypto collateralized one. But it's been doing well, but it's still pretty severely lagging.
Well, and not only that, like even MakerDAO has deposits at financial institutions, or at least the foundation that oversees it. It's at banks in Switzerland and things like that. So, and it owns as collateral treasuries, I believe. So there's like even the fully Web3 stablecoins haven't scaled, and even the ones that have a foot in the old world. And yeah, it's just an interesting kind of development, right? I mean, we've always said that on the show that there's some irony, the fact that the first killer app for crypto is to export the US dollar. This thing that I believe, Satoshi and other people early in Bitcoin were looking to, if not disintermediate, at least make less important the need for, financial institutions and fiat currencies. So I always find that a little bit amusing. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see. Some of this profit, I think, is on gains from Bitcoin and some other investments, right? So it's not just from interest margin, because you can't actually get there on the interest margin from the treasuries. Even if it had $100 billion in treasuries, it's still not going to make 6.2, right? That would be, unless they're including the appreciation of the underlying assets because of interest rates going down. But there's a component here that's money probably from gains of investments that they own. Anyway, so that's Tether. Nothing really, to your point, nothing seems to be close to catching it. And I think what's the irony of your comment is that it's not just competition, it's regulation that will make it defensible, right? Yeah. It's like because the rules say that, you can't pay depositors, therefore, unless you plan on being a security issuer, that they actually have to keep it all for themselves. Oh, darn. What a shame for Tether.
Yeah. Tough life. So,
yeah, tough life. Yeah.
And I think one other thing that was kind of interesting, not to sort of shift gears too much, but I don't know if you saw the Ethereum name service partnered with GoDaddy to essentially like merge traditional domain names with, ENS, like blockchain names. So ENS is pretty cool. It allows you to like create your own username that's tagged to like a public key, like a wallet.
So just explain that for people. So like a URL, like andrewyoung.eth, right?
Yeah.
But it's a URL that you actually have. It's attached to a private key. So you actually own it in the sense that it's like kind of like a crypto asset. Is that right?
Yeah, and part of, yeah, exactly. It's almost like, I think of it almost like email addresses for crypto wallets, because like it's it's not that fun to send $1,000 to 0x565 AB242 or whatever. Like it's like it's kind of, it's always a scary experience.
Well, it's always scary before, but then it feels like a relief and an amazing thing after the fact when it does land.
Yeah, exactly. So with crypto, obviously, like you have to send it to the public key, and it's just a mess. Whereas ENS, not that it's a mess, but it's kind of scary and complex. Whereas ENS allows you to.
By that you mean like you get the zero, you get one letter wrong, and you send it to the public.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, it's hard to know if you got a letter wrong, because this is like a 20-digit or whatever digit thing. So with ENS, like it allows you to essentially attach like human readable names.
Yeah.
So like you could have Alex.eth, and then that's just like much easier. When you're sending funds or like doing anything, or like tracking what you're doing. So yeah, it's kind of it's like a really nice UX sort of fix to at least Ethereum. And ENS is the biggest, I believe, out of all the sort of like projects building in this space. So it's kind of cool. So I didn't dive too much into this. I just saw it hit sort of the news tape. But it looks like they sort of partnered with GoDaddy to sort of like link your ENS name to an actual URL. Did you look into this more?
I probably not more than you have, but I did read an article about it, and I think it's really interesting for a couple of reasons. One is that it's going to unlock a lot of people or a lot of domains on that use GoDaddy that can access ENS. But also, to me, like, why would GoDaddy do this? Well, it's a recognition as a sort of traditional Web 1 company, honestly, that there's growth opportunities in blockchain native applications, let's call it that, and that this is a way for them to grow into this area as well. And it's an interesting example of companies reaching into the Web3 toolkit by, either investing in something, acquiring something, partnering with someone, and hiring to become knowledgeable and to start offering services in this area. So I don't really have like a big view on this, other than it seems like it's good for ENS, that's for sure. Partnership, company, 20 million users, and so on. But for GoDaddy, it could be even more material because it helps them get a foothold in this new area. So I thought that was interesting. Another piece of news that's out is that FTX plans on liquidating its 8% stake in AI startup Anthropic, and then that's going to help compensate victims. So apparently the valuation on that stake is like $1.4 billion. And it turns out that actually FTX users are going to be made whole on their deposits. Is that true? What's the deal there?
Yeah, so technically it is true, but like practically speaking, not true. So what I mean by that is, if I had $1,000 at FTX when it went down, I now will be receiving $1,000. $1,000 now, or sorry, not now, but like when they sort of pay out and liquidate. The only thing is most people held that $1,000 in Bitcoin or ETH or any number of crypto assets, and those assets have gone up dramatically in the last 12 months, like I guess 13, 14 months now. So that $1,000 is actually maybe more like $4,000 or $3,000. I mean, if it was Sol, it's maybe like $5,000 or $6,000.
Yeah.
So you are kind of like, I guess, yeah. Like what they did is after the fact, they just pegged the value based on the US dollar value, which was a very sort of generous reading, generous to FTX liquidators
right.
reading of the situation, but allows them to claim that everyone got paid out 1-to-1. But again, practically speaking, the vast majority of people held their assets in crypto. And so a true repayment would be in the crypto asset itself, not in actual, not in US dollars. It's actually very similar to what happened with Mt. Gox.
Yeah. Well,
Mt.
that's
Gox.
even more extreme. But yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like Mt. Gox, they would have. I think they got paid. I think they got paid out 1-to-1. I'm not sure if that's exactly what happened. But the thing is like those assets were worth like 10 to 20x what, depending on when you received it, like a far higher multiple of what they actually received because it was early days Bitcoin. So yeah, I mean it's funny too because in hindsight, if Sam hadn't declared bankruptcy and had just like somehow muddled along, like maybe opened up withdrawals, but like with a very throttled withdrawal limit, and maybe like created a new coin, like kind of like what Bitfinex did when they got hacked for $60 million back in 2016. And just kind of like muddled along long enough for the crypto market to recover, it would have been a far different fate for him. Like like he would have been able to, claim that he paid everyone back. Crypto markets would have come back. Like FTX, the FTX token right now, even though it has essentially no relation to
No utility, no value, no real reason to have value. Yeah.
Yeah, like essentially no value at all. Effectively, at this point, it's like a meme coin. Let me just bring it up here. It's still trading at a $500 million fully diluted valuation, right? So, which is just insane. So, like, which goes to show you though that like if FTX was attached to an underwater but still functional FTX exchange, it might be worth a couple $2 billion. So that would have also helped fill the hole. And then obviously Sol is just ripped, which Alameda and I'm pretty sure the FTX exchange owned a ton on their balance sheet as well. So it's just kind of crazy. I mean, it's crazy how things happen like that. And again, maybe though we wouldn't have gotten this recovery if we hadn't washed out. Washed out a lot of the stuff in the FTX situation as well. So it's hard to know really, but it is interesting. Like a parallel universe, FTX is still around and like at least on its way to recovery.
Which universe would you like to live in? This feels like a red pill, blue pill.
Yeah. No, I'm much happier in our current universe.
I like the current. I like that I took the red pill and we had the washout and we moved on from it because ultimately I feel like it helped to reset the conversation a little bit around Web3 and crypto and maybe put us on a more stable footing, I hope. So
totally. And
muddling along while this thing, even though, look, maybe it could survive, but according to, a jury of his peers, he was guilty of many serious crimes, which even if the market had recovered, he still would have been guilty of. So do you want those kinds of people playing a leadership role in the industry that you are in, or would you rather they be held accountable and we all move on? So I'm still in the latter camp on that, but you're right. It is an interesting sort of sliding doors situation, right?
Yeah.
What could have been. Very interesting. Well, there's not really much else going these days. Well, there's one thing that seems to be really popular on Twitter, which is Web3 social, and specifically this thing called Farcaster. I've seen a couple people like Vitalik and Jeremy Allaire and others saying like, find me on Farcaster. Like, Andrew, what is Farcaster? Do you have any idea? Do I have to sign up for this? Like, please explain.
Yeah, I need to get up to speed on it as well. They just went permissionless with so like anyone can sign up now, whereas I believe before it was sort of restricted and invite only. From what I can tell, it's essentially like a decentralized social media platform, social media protocol, with Warpcast as like the main sort of app built on top of the Farcaster protocol, and it's kind of like a programmable Web3 version of Twitter. Is like a sort of a way to describe it. And they just launched this thing which is really cool called Frames, which again I need to dig more into. There's probably some really cool things we can do with SX on it as well. So, but essentially like allows you to launch almost like mini apps into like Warpcast itself.
I think it's supposed to be like a thin protocol, right? Like, so like it does basic stuff and then you can build and run applications on top of it. Kind of like how like Twitter and Facebook used to have an open API where you could build like applications, like there's TweetDeck and then Facebook had Farmville and like all those apps, and then it closed it all off. You know what I mean? Like, is it that kind of thing?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, again, I need to dig more into it. It's
Yeah.
sort of my homework for the week. And we're looking at doing something with Farcaster in the next kind of as we get ready for Super Bowl and whatnot.
Right on.
But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah. What's cool too with Farcaster is it's I think the daily active users has just been going crazy. It's now above 60,000 from I think it's 10x in like a week, which is really cool to see because like decentralized social media platforms have been this thing that like I was excited about when we first got into the crypto space, 8 years ago, or 7 years ago, I guess. So it's cool to finally see it really taking off. There's another protocol called Lens, which is launched by the same team behind Aave, which again is sort of like a Web3 version of Twitter that has done pretty well, but hasn't had the same sort of growth spurt that Farcaster has had. So it's cool to see them all sort of, they're all the whole space is kind of taken off in the last 6 to 12 months, which is also funny though because Twitter is already very like what I'd call Web3 native. Like it's already where all the conversation in crypto happens.
Yeah.
And like not to go sort of too off script, but it is interesting too because like I think if Twitter launched like a Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, if X launched its own like X coin or whatever, like effectively like made itself into like more of a sort of I don't know like blockchain based Web3 native protocol.
Yeah.
One is they could do like the world's biggest airdrop ever, which would be pretty cool. But then two is I think it would probably be worth like $50 billion fully diluted. Like there's just no way, like looking at the coin market cap rankings, that it would be lower than some of the projects on this list. And which is why, like, whenever I see these reports come out being like, oh, Twitter's only worth like $10 billion, I'm just
I was about to say Elon bought for 40 in Fidelity. So people who invested in that that private takeout have been marking it down to like 10 billion, as you point out. I think 9 billion was the number I saw. Yeah. So
yeah, I don't think
maybe that's a rescue plan for Fidelity and all these like traditional firms that got.
I don't think it would be allowed, honestly, because it'd almost be too big of an airdrop. It's similar to like what happened with Telegram. They tried to launch their own token, and essentially they had to unwind it, and then someone in the community like they open sourced the whole thing. Someone in the community launched it anyways, and it's now called Coin, and it has a $7 billion fully diluted valuation.
Yeah,
actually even more. 12. So, and like, Twitter is I think personally is bigger, at least bigger within the crypto community, and sort of has more like, I mean, Telegram's obviously really big too. I can't really compare, but more of the story is I think Twitter would be like, especially if it came from Elon, would be like definitely in the top 10 or top 15 crypto projects, which would essentially put it at like at least $20 billion, if not more. Like, would you really want to own, XRP at 30 billion or Twitter at 30? Like, personally, I would own Twitter if it was like a decentralized network. So again, that's partly why I'm just sort of, I think like the whole like, oh, Twitter is only worth $10 billion now doesn't, I mean, if it was a Web3 version, it would probably be a lot higher. It'd also be a better product in a lot of ways, because like you'd essentially make every user on Twitter now effectively like an owner of the protocol.
Yeah.
There's issues with
owners care more.
The owners care more. You could also like have a totally permissionless, developer ecosystem where anyone could build on top of the Twitter protocol. Whereas like right now, like to get access to the Twitter API, it's like $5,000 a month.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, sort of taking a step back, I think even if Twitter IPO'd, it probably would be worth more than 10 billion. So I don't really know if I agree with these like $10 billion valuations. I just don't like.
Why would Twitter be worth 10 billion in an IPO or more? Why would it be worth more than 10 billion in an IPO, do you think?
I mean, again, I don't know, but it seems weird that there'd be like an Elon Musk sort of style company, like an Elon Musk company that trades on the open market for less than 10 billion, particularly when they've lowered their cost by 80%.
Right.
But
what's your company that people start valuing on these things like earnings?
Yeah. I mean, who knows, obviously.
It's pesky metrics, right? Whereas as a protocol, who knows? Anyway.
I mean, Elon's almost like the equity version of crypto in the way like his companies, for some reason, always get a really low cost of capital. So, it does seem weird that like there would be, I don't know, I mean, again, this is not based on the metrics, but it does seem weird that Twitter would be less than 10. Like, I think there would be a lot.
Like you'd be a buyer. Not
yeah.
But if Twitter was a coin or a company, you'd be a buyer at 10 billion for sure.
Yeah, okay. Put it this way: if it was a Web3, if there was a Web3 Twitter, I would definitely be a buyer at 10 billion for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
100%.
Not financial advice. All right, yeah, very interesting. It's never going to happen, so it's a completely hypothetical thing.
You know what? You know what is funny though? Just real quick before we go, is Elon's brother was actually pushing for this. When you go through
Kimball?
Kimball was really pushing for them to like make it like a Web3 like blockchain based sort of programmable social network. It kind of like fits with Elon's like whole ethos. Like in a lot of ways, he's already outsourcing a lot of governance of the platform, where he puts out these polls. He's like, hey, should we reinstate XYZ? I mean, that's effectively just like soft consensus, as crypto people call it, soft governance.
Right.
And yeah, so Kimball was pushing for it actually quite. When you go through like and Elon Elon killed the idea, even though when you read through the transcripts, he's like, yeah, it's really cool, but the problem is, the infrastructure is just not remotely ready for like an application of Twitter size, which again, you couldn't make the whole thing blockchain based, which is definitely true. Like the current infrastructure would not be able to handle it. But infrastructure is improving every day. Who knows what like 5-10 years looks like. And so I definitely think it sort of fits this whole ethos or whatever of making it like a free speech based platform. And but anyways,
we'll see. Very interesting discussion. Who knew we're going to go down that path? I like it. So maybe we should get Kimball on the show to talk about his vision for a decentralized Twitter. Until then, that is it for this week's episode of DeFi Decoded. I'm Alex Tapscott here with Andrew Young. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time. Take it easy.
The information contained herein does not constitute an offer or solicitation by anyone in the United States or in any other jurisdiction in which such an offer or solicitation is not authorized, or to any person to whom it is unlawful to make such an offer or solicitation. Prospective investors who are not residents in Canada should contact their financial advisor to determine whether securities of the funds may be lawfully sold in their jurisdiction.